in the previous session, I unpacked what cultural capital is. And this session is about what schools can actually do. And it's what schools can actually do with the arts curriculum so that they obey Ofsted and you get a big fat tick, but you do it in a rather more intelligent and politically aware way than just importing ruling class culture and chucking it at working class kids. Now, high culture or legitimate culture is what the dominants say, what the ruling class say is legitimate. So if the ruling class are inculcated into it from a very early age, then this is high culture, okay? And it includes visual art, classical music, opera, though we won't cover that, classical theatre, poetry, ballet, the classics, and classical literature. Now, this is one of the issues with just giving the poor the culture of the rich. It is that what will happen if we were successful to give the poor the culture of the rich, what would the rich do? They would simply change what the legitimate culture is. So this idea that we just co-opt ruling class culture or legitimate culture and give it to the kids, well, the rules of the game will change then. Now, what is the culture of the rich? Well, it's the culture of those that have always been in power. The brilliant Guardian writer Afia Hirsch says, what we teach in schools is a white supremacist view of history. And one can extrapolate that further, that what we teach in British schools, Naomi, is a white supremacist view of cultural production. So what is legitimate culture? It is dead, it is white, and it is mostly male. And you say this and that happens. That actually in the 1800s and early 1900s, despite there was lower literacy levels, working class engagement with literature was vastly higher than it is now. And Shakespeare himself was absolutely deified. He was perceived to be the bard of the working class. Dickens was a popular author and was regarded by the working class as a working class hero. And theatres, the pit of the theatre in which the working class people stood, would always be full, whereas the galleries wouldn't be. Now, if you want to provide kids with the cultural capital of literature, then here is an intriguing idea. That you use that 20 minutes in form period after the register has been taken to have a class reader. And the class reader is read by the form tutor, and other kids can contribute as well, of course. But you have a prescribed reading list. Now that prescribed reading list, and I believe Bedford Free School does something, the Stuart Lock School does something similar, but it's all of the white male tradition. That prescribed reading list must acknowledge that we live in a multicultural society, and that requires a multicultural curriculum which does not disinclude white working class achievements, nor in writing this wrong superimpose exclusive whiteness on the whole of the working class. You equip kids with an immense amount of cultural capital, but that cultural capital doesn't have old as better than new, it doesn't have white as better than black, it doesn't have male as better than female. And I've kind of deliberately put towards year 11, it gets kind of more interesting as you go along through the years. I've deliberately put the text with perhaps more mentions of sex and maybe even mentions of drugs towards the end. And I think there's a lot to that. And I think it would, if people had the bravery to implement it, I think it could alter kids' experience of literature. I remember one specific kind of quite small white kid in a school in Croydon who was quite bright. And he was one of the most vehement about how he wasn't enjoying the book in the early stages. And at the end of it, he said, "Oh, it blew me away, sir." And I asked him, why were you so anti at the start? He said, "Because I've never read a book before." Now, this is a very serious issue, I think. If you want to generate the love of reading, then what have you got to do? You've got to read. And so consequently, I think that there should be a statutory entitlement for young people to read high quality texts from different sources. So here's my scores. Now, bearing in mind that I come from the most vulgar social class there is, and consequently my primary habitus, the way that I was taught as a kid, is that one should always eat meat and two veg, it was called, despite the fact there was 3 veg, but potatoes for some reason were left out of the 2 veg. So I have an inbuilt bias from my upbringing towards the left one over the right one. So I think the left one is going to fuel your body rather better than the right one. A lot more effort has been put into presentation on the refined meal. I don't know which one I'd like the taste of more, but I think I'd like the experience of eating the left one rather than the right one. But actually, more often than you would think, culture is used as an excuse for people to a means of humanizing the barbaric. More often than you would think, you will find that somebody will be whistling Mozart as they enforce a policy that sends children into penury. So culture is a means of the dominant convincing themselves that they are somehow moral, and convincing themselves they are somehow superior humans. And that's, to an extent, why the book is called The Fascist Painting. This is a Kandinsky woodcut. And it's up to you. See if you can read any meaning in that. It's called Improvisation 24. It doesn't mean anything at all. It's nonsense. And my wife, of course, berated me for the purchase of them and wanted to know why. And ultimately, I really understand now, after reading Bourdieu, the reason I bought those is to prove that I'm not the same as the rest of my extended family. And how am I proving I'm not the same as the rest of my extended family? By showing that I can find meaning in things which have no meaning. So our taste, and this applies in artistic terms, is just a result of our brainwashing, because the things that we think denote good taste are basically the things that are more expensive, and the same applies to culture. And there's an element of cultural capital, as espoused in British schools at the moment, is that it seeks to take some of the working class cultural capital away from them, okay, and replace it with something else. Now, the obvious thing, if you just want to please Ofsted, just put some bark on an assembly, and the inspector, who doesn't know what cultural capital is, will come in and go, oh, you got bark on in the assembly, and perhaps you might want to do a 2-minute talk about bark. But actually, there's a lot more that could be done. In my view, the music curriculum is probably sometimes a bit disappointing, okay? You could rewrite it so that it studies the political tradition of protest and the work of great lyricists. You could combine with the English department. But this is the idea that I think has most promise. The argument here is that you start much, much earlier. So to improve cultural capital in drama, you would change the Year 9 drama curriculum so it features Brecht. Arthur Uri is a very good place to start, as it's entertaining. Through Brecht, we start teaching non-formalistic approaches. You move into Beckett and look at Krapp's last take, Not Waiting for Godot, as that's really difficult. And you look at Artaud. And to improve greater cultural capital, along with the reading list for the form groups, you also, at the same time, Year 7 are reading Much Ado About Nothing, you study it in drama. So what we do is we use ruling class art forms because we're on the curriculum, and we have to. But then again, there's also these ruling class art forms can include seditious revolutionaries like Blake, but we use them to create working class art. I'm just going to do a few bars of this because this is something the artist Brotherman did for me a few years ago. He took a William Blake lyric and mashed it up.
Yeah, it's Brotherman performing that age-old William Blake. I chose a poem from Songs of Experience called Little Girl Lust, over a beat by Flips, from Brother to Blake and back. In futurity, I prophetic see that the earth from sleep, grave the sentence deep, will emerge from me, the modern day.